Hey there, Editor Bob coming at you with a little heads up here as we start this episode, just to say that Grace and I recorded this one on the road, as it were. You'll hear us say in a minute that we're sort of in the middle of moving, so we weren't in our usual setup, and if this episode sounds a little bit different than usual, that's why. Let's get on with the show. Welcome to It's What Our Characters Would Do, the podcast where a neutral good ranger and a chaotic neutral warlock talk about RPGs, roll funny dice, and give away some sweet loot. I'm Bob World Builder.
I'm Grace World Destroyer.
And today we're talking about the worst RPG house rules. And we're giving away a set of DCC dice. Yeah, some cool, wacky dice. But first, Grace, how are you feeling today?
Oh boy. Yeah,
I feel like I was being a little weird there in the intro.
No, I started a new job.
Hooray!
Remember that?
Yeah.
Remember when I started a new job?
Oh yeah, that was between these episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
I work now in human resources.
Humans are resources.
They're only resources.
Absorb the resources.
Yep. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And we're gonna move soon.
Yeah, we're moving.
Yay.
Woo.
We just officially, figured out we got this new apartment, which was like kind of a hassle to get straightened out because they don't believe I have a real job. Which I don't have a real job, I guess, but it's pretty legit.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I'm showing up to our appointments with the manager there in like my little suits and whatnot.
Grace is full on professional now,
with
and I'm just like
my badge, my keys.
I'm just wearing like sweatpants and one shoe, and my hair's all up. No, that's not actually what I look like. Wouldn't that be crazy if, like, besides the half an hour I take to film a video every week, I just look like absolute crap.
Yeah, that wouldn't be very funny to me.
Well, hey, you're not even. So that's the thing.
I guess
right
you
now,
can wear whatever you want when I'm not home.
Right? Yeah, I mean, you're out at work all day. I'm just bumming around.
I'm bringing home the bacon, and Bob's just eating all the bacon.
I'm creating the bacon at home. Creating other bacon at home.
I'm bringing it home. He's cooking it.
Yeah, bingo. Yeah. And another side note is, like, just yesterday we got this exciting news that D&D isn't, like, getting rid of the OGL and stuff. I don't know if we had talked about that actually in the previous episode intro.
I think it all happened after that. Wow.
Yeah,
within a month.
so
It felt like it went on forever.
I know. But it's true that actually it was really like the first week of January, and now it is the very end of January as we're filming this. This will go up in February. That's how time works.
But remember, we all won.
Right. Yeah. I actually had it memorized for like a day. Can you get it off the top of my head?
We, the consumers, won, and which the coast also won. But remember, they won. They won too.
Well, right.
Don't forget that. They won. We all won.
So on the top of my head, I'm pretty sure we got second. You'll hear people say that they won because they forced us to change our minds. They will only be half right. They won. And so did we.
Everybody's a winner.
I actually saw somebody, one of these creators, who actually was the guy who, like, broke the first, like, leak when it was really, like, well before Gizmodo's article and everything. He actually had that, like, printed on a mug.
Yeah.
It's like, that's pretty funny. Yeah, I'm really glad they actually then, the rest of their statements sounded much more human.
Well, adult.
Yeah.
The problem with the original statement was it sounded like it was written by a teenager.
Yeah. And for a wonderful little segue here, they even had a line saying, like, oops, guess we rolled a 1.
We rolled a 1. Oh, look at this cute little in-joke we all have with each other.
Look at how we know,
look,
like, the game.
We're having fun. We're having fun together. We're all winning, and we're having fun.
We're just a couple of gamers. Yeah.
Yeah, gamer to gamer. Give us all your money.
Yeah, so speaking of maybe crit fumbles, right? We're talking about bad house rules today, and we can start it off with our first segment, the quick build, where we try to summarize the topic/goal for this episode in 3d6 words or fewer. I think you recited it last time. So, yeah, you can roll for me, and I'll just go for it.
You have 15 words to describe terrible house rules.
So let's try to not use that many, because as we talked about last time, trying to fit the number is sometimes a trap. We will review terrible RPG house rules and entertain you, hopefully. Okay. Yeah, so I got a list here, a short list, which I pulled from a video. Actually, this was a DM layer video, I'm pretty sure, from like a while back. That it was just him like reading a bunch of house rules. So we're just going to read a couple of these. I didn't pull them all from the episode. I'll probably link it down in the description so you can check out that video if you want. And then, of course, after our little break, we will review some terrible house rules submitted by you. And then we'll pick whoever wins that gold dice. So first one on this list, I think this was the first in his video, was critical fumbles. How do you feel about that?
I only do a critical fumble if it adds something funny or dramatic to the situation.
Yeah.
For example, any Keystone tier campaign patrons who are listening to this may remember a fight with a giant crab inside a bubble of air beneath the boiling lake.
Wow.
This
was a recent session.
Yeah, this was, we were playing, what's it called again?
Dungeons and Dragons?
Are you sure? I don't know. White Plume Mountain.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And they were fighting this giant crab in this force field beneath a boiling lake, and the crab rolled a natural 1. And I was like,
oh.
So I'll only do it if something immediately pops into my head. Like,
sure.
I don't take time to think about it. If I can't immediately think of something, there's no fumble.
Yeah.
But then I was like, break the force field.
Of the bubble.
Of the bubble, yeah. So the crab slashed the force field, the water started rushing in, and nice. I think 2 characters died.
Yeah.
But since this was just a one-shot, and they were under-leveled for the adventure, I gave everybody 3 lives.
Yeah.
So it was fine. But yes, that's just an example of a situation where I would use a critical fumble. If it's just like a regular fight, and nothing interesting would happen besides, like, your weapon breaks, which is the worst.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
No one likes it.
Nobody likes it. No one thinks that's fun. It should add something, not just take something away.
Right. And what I like about that example is it kind of, like, threw off everyone involved.
And
the crab and
including me.
Well, yeah,
as the DM, because
then you're kind of forcing yourself to improvise a little bit. Like, it's exciting.
Yeah. Now the dungeon is flooded with boiling water.
Yeah, I think that was a cool instance of implementing a critical fumble. Now, as with several of the things on this list, I couldn't help but realize, and a little bit ironic even with this episode and with our loot giveaway, a number of these things are not house rules, but like just the way it works in DCC, in Dungeon Crawl Classics. So critical fumbles are a part of that game. Like there's tables for, I think each class gets their own table, or it might just be like spellcasters have one, marshals have another, something like that. And yeah, there are some that are like breaking your weapon. I think that's kind of like as worse as it gets, or probably the worst ones are like hurting yourself somehow.
Or like an ally.
Yeah, I don't even know if there's like friendly fire on any of these tables. But one thing I like about DCC that makes it a little better handled is that there's like a luck stat, and your luck modifier affects how you roll on these tables. So even if you get a crit fumble, like as long as you have like a +1 luck, like you could never get the worst result on the table. Still change how that works. Anyway, that's critical fumbles. I am kind of on the fence with that one because I tend to like a goofier game where that kind of stuff can happen. Of course, if it's a super dramatic situation, yeah, you don't want to like have a goofy thing happen in the middle of that.
Yeah.
But so I think that can be kind of hit or miss. Anyway, another bad house rule. If your character dies, roll up a level 1 character.
No.
Yeah, I don't like that at all. I don't even know if I've ever heard anyone really using that.
Then you're not even like playing the game. If you're by like level 5, if
Yeah.
you're level 1, you're just going to keep dying.
Yeah.
What's the point?
So that's the thing. This isn't an example from DCC. I do feel like a lot of these are kind of just an old school way of playing. Now, I don't even know if that was like originally a rule anywhere in the history of D&D, but yeah, it just sounds terrible because it would be so unfun to play when you're just objectively worse than everybody else you're playing with. Yeah. I don't know. So I think that one's pretty across the board. Leave a comment below if you think it's cool to roll a level 1 character if you die. I mean, I guess if you die during the first session,
That's
then
fine.
of course
Like,
roll a level character. But I'd say if the party's like even level 3 or higher, it's like that would just stink. I don't know.
Yeah, the same goes for like if you are using experience points, which I guess some people still do for some reason.
Yeah, like 10% of people, according to every poll I see.
And you actually make people like miss out on experience points if they're not there for the session. And then like you keep playing without someone who can't make it, and then...
You know, that's not a terrible point. In a game where, if the party is not all at the same level, like if characters are at different levels,
if you're just playing that way,
it's not as bad. But I would still
I wouldn't play that way.
Yeah, I would say like at worst, then it's like maybe they come in a level, like one level lower than everyone else. But then if they died again, I wouldn't like keep it cumulative, something like that. Okay, what about this one? Permanent injuries.
I think
I'm raising my eyebrows.
Can be done well.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's cool to have a character like with a scar, right?
Yeah,
for some reason.
like missing a limb.
Yeah.
But you have to be careful that you're like actually creating mechanics for this for it to even happen.
Well,
because
sure.
If it can happen to the players, then they're going to want to make it happen to their enemies too.
Oh, that's a good point.
It's like called shots. It has to affect both sides.
Yeah. So I'd say this is actually a decent thing to happen, like maybe in the case of, I don't know, I'm trying to draw this back to critical fumbles or crits.
More from environmental hazards.
Yeah.
Like a collapsing tunnel, your leg gets caught.
Oh, yeah.
Or, consuming poison, and now you have, like, permanent stamina loss or constitution loss.
I mean, I really like the collapsing tunnel example because it makes me think of a scenario where you have the party rushing out of this tunnel as it's collapsing. Maybe it's like the mouth of the dungeon. They're trying to flee at the last minute here, and you have everybody roll a deck save to leap out, and maybe it's, like, not even that high of a DC, but somebody, like, nat ones it.
Yeah.
Instead of them, like, dying, they just come out with some injury.
A leg.
Yeah, or something. Like, it can still be something serious without it being a death. So that's a good time to do that. And actually, this connects to a game I recently made a video about, 5 Torches Deep, where if your character goes to 0 hit points and then is resurrected, there's, like, some % chance. Because every time if you come up from 0, you, like, roll on a D20 table, and a bunch of those results include, like, some injuries that could happen to you. And I think, like, your character nearly dying is a place that's pretty valid to put in a serious injury. Mm-hmm. It just would depend on, kind of like you said, having rules for it. So now, like, is this is my speed permanently lowered because I lost my leg and now I have a prosthetic or something? Like, I don't know how I feel about that stuff. I think keeping it aesthetic is a safe way to go.
Well, I did do that once. When we were playing Out of the Abyss... And Steven the Animal's character lost his leg because he was, like... So he was petrified.
Oh, yeah.
He was levitating. He was petrified, and then he fell 300 feet.
Yeah. He
survived because he was petrified.
Yes.
But I was like, there's got to be some kind of consequence here. So I had his leg break off.
Yeah.
But
pretty valid.
You kept the leg... And the person that you had depetrify him kind of left part of the stump as stone so he wouldn't bleed out. And then you, went to the stone giants who were able to reattach the leg and make it mobile.
Wow.
But I did make it so he couldn't swim.
Yeah. And
his speed was reduced by, 10 feet.
Because they put it on backwards.
No, they put it on forwards, but it was just really heavy.
Yeah, and actually, I don't know. I like that because... So maybe not injury-wise, but another like little thing from Dungeon Crawl Classics here that I like is that spellcasters, particularly wizards, can end up with like mutations from magic going wrong. So it's not necessarily an injury, but it's just going to be the longer your character lives and gets through all these harrowing situations, eventually they just end up being this like literally battle-scarred adventurer. And I think there's something to be said for that instead of the like, clean and crisp hero coming out of everything unscathed every time. That just gets old to me.
I just emotionally scar my players.
Yeah. Hey, that's another way to handle it in a role-playing game. What about, I feel like I phrased this one weird. I just wrote strict alignment. I don't actually know how he discussed it in the video.
Like, you decide it before you even play the character, and then
so house rule is like, hey, you have to follow your alignment.
Yeah, there are penalties for not following your alignment.
Why don't we say that? Yeah.
I think that discourages organic role play and character development.
Yeah.
You shouldn't decide what your character's alignment is until you've played them a couple sessions with the rest of the party.
Yeah.
Because how the rest of the party acts, exerts peer pressure on the character.
Yeah.
Like, I was playing my Blade Singer Wizard in Waterdeep. She started off chaotic good. But after being with this party for a while and making friends with the more like, she's like a vampire fairy, now she's become more chaotic neutral.
Yeah.
So I like officially made that change.
Yeah.
And have been playing that way more freely.
And I like that. I think as long as the group is okay with, like, I am of the opinion that alignment should follow the player's methods, I guess, of how they portray their character. So it's like you can choose an alignment early on, but then if you play them a certain way, the alignment changes.
Yeah.
That's all. Yeah. And I think in 5e, it's like, that's like not even an issue for pretty much every table. In DCC, though. I won't keep going on to that, but it is more important in DCC. Okay, let's say one other from here, and then we'll have a little break. Nerfing/banning official rules.
If you're going to do that, you have to be real careful because it's a lot more of a domino effect than people think it is. And that's why, in these house rules, a lot of them that seem good on paper are not so much.
Yeah. Gotta play test. And I mean, I guess that's the way to test it if it's just with your home group, anyway. Gotta live and learn. Or
and
die and learn.
I think a lot of times when someone wants to nerf or buff a house rule or class or something, it's because they saw like a bunch of people complaining about it on Reddit.
Yeah.
And they didn't actually experience it for themselves. That's what happened with Silvery Barbs.
Yeah.
Which is not as OP as everyone thought it was at first.
I mean, I've still never even seen it used in a game.
I have. The one thing is that technically you can use it on yourself.
Oh.
To give someone else advantage.
Okay, not you advantage, someone else advantage. Okay. Like not to get too in the weeds of Silvery Barbs, because again, I don't even remember how it works off the top of my head. But every rule in the game, is technically just a designer's house rule that they put in a book. And so, ideally, we like to imagine that they're playtesting every single mechanic, but some of it might not be playtested. Some of it's definitely playtested more thoroughly than others. So there's always going to be some quirks even in the official rules. Yeah.
This is why when the bard attempted to use Silvery Barbs on himself, and we found out that you could do it, but the DM was like, I don't want you to do that. We were like, okay, because he's the DM.
Yeah, sure. And, if something seems overpowered or whatever, just really read the rule closely. Because a lot of the times, the wording is legit, but it's just sometimes somebody just looks at the name of a thing and assumes it works one way and doesn't actually even closely read the mechanic itself. So, yeah. That's a little lesson for you. We're going to take a short break. Short rest. We are back, and it is time for a random encounter, where we roll to read your stories and questions, generally about this topic, and the person who wrote our favorite story or question takes home the loot.
Let's roll. 6.
Wild Picks, or Wildepicks. I played with a DM once who was a real jerk. He had many secret house rules and ideas about D&D that amounted to him telling his story in his way with his DMPC being the real hero. It was terrible all around, which makes it hard to figure out what was the worst part of it, but I'll go with his ruling that the more skilled someone is, the harder it is to make the roll. Once we figured out his hidden rule, we realized that the cleric with no lockpicks was more likely to open the lock than a rogue with expertise in lockpicking. Essentially, what he was doing was using your passive score to set the DC for everything. If you had a +5 stealth, you needed to roll a 15 on the dice to remain undetected. If you had a -1, you only needed to roll a 9. The kicker was you needed to roll for every 5 feet of movement. It goes without saying that the group quickly fell apart. Nobody wanted to spend their time watching this jerk tell his story. We tried talking reason to him, but he wasn't reasonable.
That is so silly.
I didn't even notice the movement part when I put this in here.
What game are you playing? Because that's not 5e.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Yeah, I mean...
Roll for every 5 feet of movement? Roll what?
That's a good point.
The walking skill? What? Can you be proficient in it? That's what I want to know.
That's literally... Yeah, wow. That is like the antithesis of... Because, like, you know, a common, like, thing I see on videos every once in a while is, like, secret hack to improve D&D. Don't roll. And then the thing is basically just saying, like, you know, you roll a lot less. You know, like, you just role play through a lot of things instead of asking for dice. Whereas this guy's like,
this is like
you're rolling for every single thing.
Yeah. Roll to make sure you remember to breathe today.
Yeah. You know, and I almost liked the idea of the passive score thing, because the thing is, some games out there have a roll under mechanic. You know, think of Call of Cthulhu.
Yeah.
You have a score and then you're trying to roll under it, so the higher your score is, the easier it is to do that. But this guy just did it in the opposite counterintuitive way.
He tried it, but he stumbled on the dismount with that.
Yeah, did not follow through. All right, let's roll again.
1.
The Red Duncan 64. This is a pretty common one, but I've experienced it firsthand. In a couple of campaigns that a DM, a friend of mine, ran, he would rule that rolling a natural 1 on a weapon attack would cause you to drop your weapon in the middle of combat, and it would require your bonus action to pick it back up. Yeah, so always dropping your weapon, terrible way to do a fumble.
Yeah, the same thing every time.
Yeah, well, and it's one of those things that...
like, what? You could glue your weapon to your hand.
Yeah. You get
for
a
every
sword
combat.
that, like, is a gauntlet.
Yeah.
I don't
know. You could tie it to your wrist.
Yeah.
Like, there are ways to overcome that.
Right. But it just proves how ridiculous the rule is in the first place that you would have to do that, you know?
Yeah.
And to me, it's like a perfect example of how people say critical fumbles are, like, just terrible for martial characters. Yeah. Because obviously, like, they're the only ones having to deal with this. The more attacks they make, it's always a 1 in 20 chance of rolling a natural 1. So
and a spellcaster can just always resort to saving spells.
Yeah, so your, like, level 15 fighter or whatever they have when they have, like, triple attack has a higher chance of dropping their weapon, like, in combat than a level 1
The better
character.
You get at it, the harder it is.
Yeah.
Just like...
You just get slipperier.
Just like when... Yeah, you sweat more because you're making more attacks. But it's just like when you're prone.
Sure.
And it takes half your movement to get back up. That happened to me recently because in our rooftop chase of Waterdeep, I was in Bladesong.
Right. So
and I had cast ethereal or kinetic jaunt on myself. So I had 50 feet of movement.
Yeah.
I slipped and it took 25 feet of movement to stand back up.
Whereas a less dexterous person, it would only take 15. That's such a weird one.
So that's an example of a real rule that should be house ruled over.
Yeah. You know, it always takes 15 feet of movement or something is an easy way to... But yeah, you're right. It's a good example. Let's roll again.
5.
Camel X. So a bad RPG house rule I've experienced was one that I incorporated in my own games. I ran D&D 5th edition death saves completely wrong. I used to have the player roll once to see if they survived or they died. It ended up making deaths very unsatisfying, and the players didn't have a chance. Plus, I didn't allow last words or any interaction with the party when the PCs die. I have always ran very narrative-driven games, and those rules were not fun for me or my players.
So they had a 50-50, or even a little bit more, like a 51%.
Yeah, I guess he didn't say what the DC
of
was
succeeding.
to see if they survived or died.
If it was 10, the odds were slightly in their favor.
Right.
And I could see this working for a grittier game.
Yeah, I've even actually talked about doing this where you flip a coin or something.
Yeah.
I think it would be interesting.
But if you are going for narrative story...
Yeah.
Where there's no last words or anything.
Exactly.
It doesn't work.
Because that's something, obviously, like last words, that's all flavor. Like every stinking dramatic movie where the character's dying in somebody's arms and they have their last words and then they die right after finishing the dramatic thing they wanted to say. Like, of course, you can throw that in your game. So, and again, this is an example of it wasn't exactly a house rule. They admitted that they were just doing it wrong, I think. It doesn't say whether or not this was intentional. It just says that they ran it wrong. It is what it is, but I agree that for a grittier game, that could actually be fun as long as you still have the last words and such.
Yeah. A grittier game where the characters know that it's easier to die, so they're putting more time into their mechanics and less time into their story.
Yeah.
9.
Ron Wingrove. Having been a gamer for a few years, I have so many of these. I think my personal favorite was a 2E campaign I played in some years ago. The DM was a terrible rules lawyer. Terrible as in not very good at it. And if there weren't rules for an exact situation, he'd have a house rule for it. One night we were escaping from a castle and lowered a rope down over the outside wall. DM. Okay, make a saving throw for the rope to see if it breaks. 1 saving throw per foot of rope per character. Me. It's a 30-foot wall and there's 5 of us. You want 150 saving throws? DM. Yes. Produces handwritten table. The difficulty is based on how much you all weigh, so add up your weight and everything in your inventory, and if it breaks near the top, you're going to take more fall damage, which is also based on how much you weigh. Produces another handwritten table. The whole thing took 2 hours, 3 repairs to the rope, which also affected the saving throws, and only ended when the wizard cast Featherfall on the last 2 characters, who jumped off the wall instead.
This is an example of how bringing realism into your game can ruin it.
Yeah, I mean, it's, the idea of, simulation, and honestly, I would say this is still totally not realistic. It just sounds really weird to me, having the rope break at any random point. I don't know, that shouldn't be a thing the characters roll for, and literally 150 rolls?
Yeah, what the heck?
What? I don't know, there's just, there's something very wrong here.
I wonder if that was the only thing he was like that for, or if he had tables for other things. I'm just thinking of it this way, right off the top of my head. Okay, it's a 30-foot rope. You want to save for every foot of it. Why don't you have 1 roll to see if it breaks somewhere based on everybody's weight, and then you roll, technically a D30, so just roll a D100 enough times to get something under 30 to see which foot of the rope it breaks in. It's just too much
rolls.
Math.
I know, but it's we could reduce that to 2 rolls instead of 150.
Did he say this was 2E?
Yeah, 2nd edition.
Well, okay.
I mean, I don't know.
Things were different back then.
It's true. It was another time.
Yeah. Still
Another
excessive.
age.
Still excessive even for 2E.
I think by anyone's standards, yeah. Because when he says the whole thing took 2 hours, I assume he means game time, real time of them sitting there rolling. Yeah. But yeah, it's I totally just feel for those last 2 characters who just jumped off. 30-foot wall? I mean, I guess
most
depending on what level you are.
Survive that.
Yeah, again, I don't know how, by 2nd edition, I don't know if characters had a lot of hit points by then. But they even said the wizard cast Featherfall. And in 5e, at least, that can affect a whole party of people, 5 or so. So should have just done that in the first place.
Yeah, I don't know what level it takes to cast it on that many people, but...
Yeah. We're getting too specific here. Let's roll again.
8.
Rune Varkavisser. Okay, they start by saying, I'm not a U.S. liver, so I can't participate in the giveaway. But I did remember some ridiculous house rules that I want to share. Bless my DMs for being better than this. These are for D&D 5e. If you roll too high on a strength check, you can fail. You just break the object you're interacting with. Combat rounds last 30 seconds instead of 6. Spell durations are not adjusted, meaning that haste is now lasts 2 rounds instead of 10. Performance rolls for tools. These were all from the same DM. And then they have 2 more here. Rolling initiative for social encounters. You couldn't talk if it wasn't your turn. And weapons break when you do maximum damage. That's probably the most egregious ones I can remember.
The last one is like in Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. When your weapon breaks, it's like a critical hit on that last attack with it.
Yeah.
But that's like to make your weapon breaking suck less.
Right.
Not to like it breaks on every crit.
So I was actually just thinking, like, what if you had a house rule where, like, oh, nat 1, your weapon is going to bust.
But it deals maximum damage.
Yeah, you actually get something out of it. Like,
that would be kind of cool, but kind of defeats the purpose of it being a 1, you know?
Well, you still lose the weapon.
Yeah, that's
I guess
true.
It probably wouldn't happen to, like, magic weapons, though.
Yeah. What else was in there?
I really like
the
I really like the rolling too high on a strength check. You could break the object you're interacting with.
I've actually done that before. Like if there's like a wooden chest.
Oh yeah.
That like if they try to smash it open, there's a potion inside that breaks.
Oh.
Like I've done that.
Oh yeah. Well, I feel like that's totally valid. I guess it depends on what. Yeah, I guess it's like, what would the context of this be? Because I usually think it's like, what are strength checks for? You're usually trying to
you're usually trying to break something.
Like I'm thinking of a door being like primary.
If you roll too high, you break your arm.
Oh no! They said break the break the object you're interacting with. Yeah,
maybe
I feel like that's usually the intention.
If you're just trying to lift something. And instead, it just crumbles in your hands. Okay. You're lifting so hard.
Or like throw something. There's ways. There's ways to, I mean, hey, real life example. This happened to me yesterday. Grace knows about this. So our mailbox at our apartment, the lock is just kind of jammed. So you have to turn the key a little hard. And this is the way I've been opening this mailbox for like 2 years. And I opened it just like I always do. And the key just like shredded. It was the weirdest experience, like sensation of this key just like, which had no like visible damage or anything from doing this for so long. The key just broke, but it like peeled away. It was just like the weirdest thing. Like I did not expect the metal
like tin foil.
Yeah, I guess like a aluminum foil or something, basically like a chunk of it. Didn't know my own strength.
Yeah, just roll too high on your strength check.
Yeah, and then I had to go to the post office like 3 times. Anyway, let's roll again.
7.
It's the Dalton. Worst house rule I've experienced was in a 3.5e campaign. Every character had to worship a god, and whenever a player dropped to 0 HP, they had to make a religion roll. Depending on the roll, our PC's god would resurrect us, albeit with something different. Example, my PC worshipped the god of slaughter, Erithnuel, and when I died, via being mauled by a shark, Erithnuel brought me back as a half-troll. The idea is interesting in theory, but we weren't privy to this homebrew until 3 PC deaths later, and 2 of us weren't particularly happy with our characters. Also, the DM wouldn't let our PCs walk from the group, so we were stuck with these unkillable characters. I guess I don't know why they're unkillable.
Well, because they never die if they roll high enough.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the DM's like forcing you to play a certain race. I don't like that.
Yeah, I mean, there is, of course, the reincarnation spell where you get a different body.
Yeah, but you know what you're buying into with that.
Yeah.
That it's like gonna be random. And I probably choosing to play that character. Whereas they're saying like they're reincarnated, and then even if they wanted to like be like, I don't want to play this kind of character, the DM's just making them stick with this character.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
But it's like, can they really make you do anything? Because
well, no.
You don't have to keep playing.
Of course not, yeah. Maybe that's another lesson here for if you're out there experiencing any terrible DM house rules, talk to them about it. And then remember, you don't actually have to play with them.
Also, I have a question of how they didn't realize this was a thing until after 3 deaths.
Right. Maybe they didn't realize it was going to be for everyone's gods or something.
Maybe.
Because, I don't know if they all worship the same god.
Yeah, that's just a weird thing. 4.
Jake Adams. My old DM had a house rule where he made the death saves for PCs and didn't tell us. At first, we were excited about making the game more intense, but it quickly proved annoying after a character died due to him rolling a nat 1 on a save. With no indication that we needed to hurry, they died in 2 rounds, and we got to him to heal before the 3rd round. The rule essentially took the fun out of the encounter and frustrated the player who just had some character growth before his character died right away.
I don't actually think this is a bad house rule.
Yeah, I think it's kind of just a consequence
of... You were unlucky that one time.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know how many death saves someone had succeeded at or failed.
Right.
I mean,
that's the purpose of that house rule.
Plenty of people do blind death saves where only the DM knows.
Right. I think that's what they're saying here.
Yeah.
The DM rolled them, and then they didn't realize.
Right, but like it's still the person rolling, but they just roll secretly to the DM.
Oh, if it's online.
Yeah, people do that. But yeah, like if your character's unconscious, they're not telling them like, "Oh, I feel like I lost a lot of blood this time." Yeah.
I mean, I guess the thing is like the DM could have said like, after they failed the first one, "Whoa, they're really not looking good." And at that point, if they're still assuming like, we got 3 rounds to get to them, then it's on them. But if
I think it was still on them because you should never assume that you have 3 rounds.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. This is a tough one. But ultimately, I'm still going to like give them some, I don't know if credence is the right word here, but the sense that like, a house rule can be bad just because you don't like it, because it's what every house rule is. Just some are more widely unpopular than others. So I think like, if you don't want to play with that rule, cool. I mean, it sounds like you probably don't anymore. So lesson learned.
Yeah, that rule is bad for you.
Yeah.
But I personally don't
I think it's
kind
of neat.
I just had a second character die.
Grace World Destroyer over here.
From a natural
Snapping
1.
Necks. Left and right.
So in the same campaign, 2 characters have now died by going unconscious, falling from a height, failing a death save from fall damage, and then rolling a natural 1 and dying. 2 characters.
I didn't realize the fall damage was also a part of it for both of them.
Yeah.
That's
one
suspicious.
Was flying, the other was standing on the ceiling.
Did they have to make 148 checks on a rope?
Well, no, because they were already unconscious, so they just fell like a sack of potatoes.
Yep.
Hit the ground.
Poor sacks of potatoes. Okay.
Yep.
2 more to go.
3.
Pan. I remember one of the most broken and horrible house rules I made was the ability to train ability scores. On paper, the rule isn't terrible, but the implementation gave me a party of level 3 characters who were able to beat CR5 creatures with absolute ease.
That's kind of the equivalent of just if you're doing like experience-based leveling, just going into the woods and grinding.
Just killing a bunch of boars. Killing
wolves until you're level 20.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. So it's like, I guess characters can legitimately do that depending on how your game works anyway, like if you use experience points. But it sounds like they probably didn't. They thought this would be cool. I do think it's neat to put in other ways besides leveling up that you can improve ability scores, but they need to be few and far between. Like a rare, I'm using the just colloquial term rare magic item or whatever.
Yep. It's one of those things that like you have to consider how this is going to affect the rest of the game.
Right.
No, there's only one left.
There's only one left. From Lomo. My old GM, bless his heart, regularly proposed the most half-baked homebrew ideas in the middle of the campaign. He got group feedback, which was almost always a hell no, so we didn't try most, but some ideas include everyone gets 2 bonus actions, but moving more than 10 feet requires a bonus action.
What's the point?
Yeah, that's just 1 step forward, 2 steps back, almost literally. All healing spells deal 1d6 damage to the caster. I mean, that's an interesting one. I kind of like the idea of magic coming from somewhere, but...
Yeah, if you're doing, like, a campaign where, like, magic is, like, blood magic, and you're using your own life energy to cast spells...
Yeah. Well, something here, it says you can spend 2 hit points per spell level to cast a spell without spell slots. Like, that's kind of interesting. Probably 2 HP is too low.
Or it should be you could only do it a certain number of times per day.
Yeah, maybe just like spend a whole hit die. I don't know.
It's one of those things that should be a class feature, not.
It probably should. Yeah. I don't know, but and it probably is.
One
right?
of the 10 million
blood. What's it called?
There.
Matt Mercer class.
There is some kind of blood No, well, Blood Hunter is different, but in the Tal'Dorei campaign setting book, there is
It's got a blood wizard too, right?
There's a blood wizard, and I think a blood cleric.
Yeah, blood stuff's pretty cool from time to time.
Yeah, there's so many homebrew blood magic classes. And I'm sure that is a feature from one of them.
To death. And what do you say here? He also threw in critical fumbles into a session with no warning, which caused our barbarians, Nat 1, to create a fireball.
Wow.
And forced us all to retreat from a fight we were previously winning. We had a long talk after that one.
Was the critical fumble table just the wild magic table?
Was the barbarian striking a flint shield with a steel weapon?
Yeah, and was the air filled with flammable gases?
Yeah. Someone left the stove on? I don't know. That's interesting. Wild magic barbarian.
Wild magic, see, they can't do stuff like that. Their table is different.
Yeah. All right. And for our favorite story/question, this one was really just a good story. The episode's loot winner is Ron Wingrove for rolling 150 saving throws to descend the rope. You earned it. All the way back in 2E. Well done. You're going home with a set of DCC dice, so now you can roll even crazier. You got all the dice you need. Well done. All right, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend and...
8.
Oh boy. Tickle that like button. Tickle that like button to be eligible for loot. Oh, that's a weird table. To support this show, consider subscribing or joining Patreon through the links below. Patrons also get a private RSS link to listen through your favorite podcast platform and a bunch of 5e one-shot adventures. Thank you for your support, and keep building.
Stop building.